It might have all began with Marlon Brando screaming Stella in A Streetcar Named Desire. Brando, at the time, the ultimate physical example of gruff manhood, weeping, ripping his shirt off to reveal bulging muscles, appearing at once terrifyingly violent and rivetingly vulnerable all at the same time. And ever since then, this idea of a character who's both tough guy and sensitive guy has held a particular fascination with American audiences, especially during the new Hollywood 1970s heyday of the anti-hero. This dichotomy is easy to spot in Vito Corleone, Rocky Balboa, Frank Serpico, and many others, but if you imagine these characteristics as less oppositional and more points on the broad spectrum of human morality, there is honestly no other version of this character as complex as Tony Manero, John Travolta's iconic disco-dancing Oscar-nominated role in Saturday Night Fever. What makes Tony so unusual as a protagonist is how many different levels of moral choice he is confronted with in this story, and how often, though not always, he fails miserably at these tests. There are minor conversational faux pas Tony makes, or relatably human failures of empathy we watch him perpetrate. And there are also abhorrently immoral and criminal wrongs which we see him go through with. In perhaps this film's most confusing tonal choice, these moral failings are presented alongside many moments of transcendent grace and understanding that Tony exemplifies, or at least exemplifies better than anyone else in the horrible universe his friends and family inhabit. Typically, these moments of grace come from his dancing, but not always. Tony is rather observant about the life he leads. He's almost aware of the story he's in and can be quite articulate about the influences he feels pressing upon him, both from his background and the popular culture he loves. One can't help but note the movie posters on his wall for the aforementioned new Hollywood Italian-American icons Rocky and Serpico. Tony is aware he's playing a type, but it's his own variation. Less of a crier, more of a booty shaker. Less of a brute, well, I suppose that's for audiences to decide as they ingest Saturday Night Fever's singularly queasy ending. But hey, no one can deny the soundtrack does slap.
Welcome to Kale Your Idols, a new Hollywood podcast with your hosts,
Sam Ludwig
and Elena Gibson. This is a podcast about film. Primarily, we discuss movies, directors, actors, and writers known for their work during the new Hollywood era of studio filmmaking that began in 1967 with Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate, and pretty much ended in the early 80s with One from the Heart and Heaven's Gate. In this episode, we are discussing a film that seems like it should be a lot of fun to watch, but is actually one of the most depressing films ever made. That film is Saturday Night Fever.
It's Saturday Night Fever, starring John Travolta, Fran Drescher, various other people who's... I'm sorry, I'm going to stop doing this bit right now. Do you even know what I'm referencing?
Of course I do. I know you're doing Saturday Night Live. I'm not that stupid.
It's weird to me how close in proximity both of these properties are. Saturday Night Live premieres in 1975. Saturday Night Fever comes out in 1977, although Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night, the article that it was based on, I think that's from 75 too. Grateful Dead have a song. One More Saturday Night, Elton John had the big song. Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. What was going on? I think Saturday Night was sort of a weirdly salient concept to people in the 70s in a way that it hadn't been before. I think Saturday Night was sort of a new idea, like the danger but the possibility of Saturday Night. Do you know what I'm saying?
Maybe everybody was just a little bit tired of being so civically minded and just kind of wanted to go back to having fun. And so in the middle of the 70s / towards the end of the 70s, they're ready to transition into the more fun 80s mentality of just partying it up.
I just don't even know what partying was like in the 30s. I mean, obviously, I know people are going to juke joints and speakeasies in the 20s, and people are having a raucous time, but I know that labor laws had it really solidified the weekend in a broad way for a lot of people, and teenagers are clearly getting more power in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I wonder if Saturday Night wasn't even viewed as that special until, I don't know, the sort of the new norms post 60s. There is something about Saturday Night that, to me, it's different than the weekend. You know what I'm saying? Like, Saturday Night is this weird vortex that you can kind of get lost in. It's the same vibe that this and Saturday Night Live is going for. It's like late night and anything can happen, you know?
I have truly never contemplated when Saturday night first became a thing. I guess when I think about like the 30s and earlier, I suppose you were either rich and always had a life of leisure and therefore weekends didn't mean anything to you, or you were always working. But I don't know. I have no idea when Saturday night became a thing.
When did stuff anywhere start being open until 4 a.m.? Has it New York always been like this, or did stuff get... I feel like stuff had to get more lax. And there is a kind of, like, we're journeying into an unfamiliar world in Saturday Night Fever, wouldn't you say?
Definitely an unfamiliar world because, you know, this movie is based on this article, Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night, written by Nick Cohen. The article is supposed to be real. In fact, it says in the beginning, everything described in this article is factual and was either witnessed by me or told to me directly by the people involved. Only the names of the main characters have been changed.
I don't know. Most articles don't really feel the need to say this. Methinks you're protesting a bit too much to start your article with, by the way, this is a real article.
Yeah, I do want to like discuss just how much it matters that whether this article was real or not, because it says that it was real and it was based on real events. But later on, you know, after Nick Cohen sold the rights of this story for them to make a movie out of it, and he made a bunch of money off of it, later in 1997, he came clean and said that he just made it all up. So the idea that this movie is presenting this very different new world, it kind of makes sense given that it was an entirely made up character and it was describing a scene, the disco scene, that was real, like it was there, but Nick Cohen, who wrote the article, he like only barely observed the scene. He said he went to 2001 Odyssey, the club where both the article and the movie take place, and he was going to go inside, but then he got thrown up on. So then he was like, never mind, I'm just going to go home. So like, it's not like he really absorbed the culture that much before writing the article.
So this guy, Nick Cohen, I didn't realize, it took me a while to put together this is the same guy. I've known about him since I was a kid because he is always referenced in the making of Tommy, the Who's Tommy album. So he was this like popular rock critic. I think he was like friends with Pete Townsend, and Townsend played him most of the score of Tommy. The guy was like, yeah, I think it's pretty good, but it's missing a hit. And this rock critic was a well-known fan of pinball. And so Pete Townsend, in order to sort of get this guy back on his side, he just sort of lets it slip. He's like, you know, I was thinking maybe Tommy should play a sport like football or maybe pinball. And the guy's like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. You should write that song. So then Townsend goes home and he starts writing Pinball Wizard, the iconic Who song, one of the greatest songs ever written. He's like, this is so fucking stupid. I can't believe I'm writing this song. And it's all just to appease this rock critic who then kind of helped to make the reputation of Tommy early on.
Yeah, he's also said to have been instrumental in the genesis of David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. So he just had his fingers in a lot of pies.
And it's just weird that like these rock stars were inspired by trying to please a critic in order to make some of their most imaginative and brilliant conceptual ideas.
But maybe he was just super cool, you know? Cool people, no matter what they're doing in life, people will recognize their coolness and be influenced by them.
It's a brilliantly written article, Tribal Rights of New Saturday Night. I would say it's really well written, and it hews in many ways closely to the film. We'll talk about some differences, but I would say as far as a character study of the central character, is he named Tony in the article? I can't remember.
He's named Vincent in the article, but the article explicitly states that they changed his real name to Vincent. So it's funny to me that they then changed the name again to Tony for the movie. Like, Vincent wasn't his real name anyways.
Yeah, maybe Tony was the real name of the imaginary guy that Nick Cohen would change the name to Vincent from. But it's a really well-written article. It kind of has an odd... Nick Cohen, right, he's a British rock critic. And a lot of what he's writing about in Tribal Rights of New Saturday Night is his imagination of what the disco scene is like, but he's really transporting his knowledge of the British mod scene into this disco setting. And, you know, the mods, I don't know if you know about it. This is
Yeah, I don't know I've heard the term mods, but I really don't get it. So thank you for being about to explain it.
Mod music is I don't know, the modern mod influenced music is like Amy Winehouse, what's that, All About That Bass, or like Duffy. It was sort of a modern mod, but the point is, mods were I mean, I'm not going to get deep into this. There is a movie of the Who rock opera Quadrophenia, which is entirely about the anthropological differences in the mid 60s of what were called the mods and the rockers. And these are sort of like two warring factions within burgeoning British rock scene, right? And the Who were heavily identified with the mods. And so a lot of this it's almost like gang life, but it also has just like a touch of cultural critique. The rockers like blues and like rockabilly stuff, and the mods, they wear tiny ties and suits, but they will still fuck you up. Like they will still beat you up if you don't like their music, right? And this whole thing that Nick Cohn's painting in this article that then is transported into the movie, it really all does have a hint of like English hooliganism to it, I would say, because we'll get into how just dreadfully awful these men in this movie are. But yeah, obviously he's completely doesn't really delve into anything about the black and gay origins of disco, the queering of culture that it represents. He's just, Nick Cohn is fixing his gaze on this idea of a brash working class kid who wants to look nice, but he's still an asshole in this kind of like I'll fight you way. And it's just all very British, I think.
Nick Cohn, I think, later realized his mistake of not acknowledging gay and black communities for how much they, gave birth to the disco culture. And
in this movie, there's quite a lot of racism and homophobia on display. Like there's a lot of anti-black, anti-gay stuff that comes up.
Yeah, definitely. But Nick Cohn said it in an interview in 2016 that his article, Tribal Rights, is about identity and finding a place in the world where you can shine. What still resonates to me, at least, is the sense of yearning. If I was writing the story today, Vincent might be trans. And I was like, you can't just like go back and say, oh, Vincent was actually kind of a trans character.
That is fucking hilarious. I see what he means. I don't think that's total bullshit, but I do think that what is interesting about this article is that he has been sent from England to write about this new burgeoning subculture in the outer boroughs of New York. It's 1975. This article, as we say, it's fictional. And by the way, there's no pictures in the article. It's all just illustrations, which is just your classic journalist dead giveaway that something is not real. I mean, they talk about this in Shattered Glass, how the New Republic was so resistant to having any photographs, and that's why Stephen Glass was able to just make up these stories because nobody got to get photographed for it.
To be fair, the artist who did the drawings did go to 2001 Odyssey Club, observe the disco scene there, and drew it. He was also fooled by Nick Cohn and was like, yeah, Cohn never introduced me to Vincent, so I don't have any drawings of Vincent. I just have it of the rest of the people. So I do think the drawings were actually based on like what he saw at the club.
And quite beautiful, too. But so this article is kind of a hot take in a way. It's Nick Cohn trying to come up with an interesting, sort of from left field take on what's happening in youth culture. He casts these people, these working class people, weekend warriors, spending all their money, their hard-earned money just to go out to this club. He casts them as a kind of anti-pretentious sect. He directly compares them to Bruce Springsteen and Patti Smith. That's supposedly the cool, hip poet of the streets, speaking to the real people. But he's like, no, these are the real people. They wear polyester, and they strut around, and they're very regressive and shitty about their women and stuff. But again, I don't think this is truly what Nick Cohn felt. Like, does he say anywhere if he likes disco?
Yeah, I haven't come across his opinions on disco music.
I imagine him treating this as like a writing exercise. How he's like, obviously, I totally don't respect these disco dancing idiots. But he's been tasked with writing this thing that's sort of like, how could you elevate this culture? And so he, I think, writes him into a weird corner of painting rock music as if it's pretentious or like for English majors or something, and that this is for the real people. And I see the writer, especially knowing that it's fake. I see him concocting this take, and it feels very like I got a weird thing to say to you.
It is a really good article. Again, it's weird to me, like, why does it matter if it was fact or fiction? Like, why did he need to say that it was real? It still obviously is a take on youth culture in America, even though he made it up and was kind of basing a lot of it off of what he was witnessing through the mod culture in Britain. People, I think, would still find it interesting to read and think about. I just don't see the need at all for him to have said it was real. But we should talk about how this article, it's part of the larger context of the new journalism style that was happening at the time. And so we've talked about new journalism before, actually, on our The Right Stuff episode, because The Right Stuff is based off of a novel by Tom Wolfe, who is one of those new journalism writers. Other new journalism writers include Truman Capote, Hunter S. Thompson.
Hunter S. Thompson says he's not new journalist. He is often lumped together, but he thinks gonzo, which is his thing, is different from new journalism.
Well, sorry, Hunter S. Thompson. But the new journalism style, it's all about using fiction techniques to tell facts. So you're describing things that are supposedly facts in a very exaggerated way. You're describing details of the room that you couldn't possibly know because you weren't there. Like, how could you possibly know? Like, the article Tribal Rights of the New Saturday Night, it has all these details about Vincent, who's the Tony character, and Donna, who's the Annette character, who, like, there's no way Nick Cohn could have known those details. This happens in the movie and also in the article, that the Annette character, she wants to sleep with Tony, but he turns her down and he walks away. And then she opens her fist and you realize she was like holding a condom because she was going to go all the way with him. Nick Cohn wouldn't have gotten those details, you know? So for me, it's just so obvious that it is fiction. And Nick Cohn himself said, "It reads to me as obvious fiction, albeit based on observation and some knowledge of disco culture. No way it could sneak past customs now." In the 60s and 70s, the line between fact and fiction was blurry. Many magazine writers used fictional techniques to tell supposedly factual stories. No end of liberties were taken. Few editors asked tough questions. For the most part, it was a case of don't ask, don't tell. Magazine writing then was basically a boys' club. There was a lot of wretched excess. Along with some great writing came reams of self-indulgent bollocks. Tribal rights, being fiction, was never a great secret. I remember once, at the end of a long night, blurting out to a publisher that the story was made up. "You don't say," the publisher drawled, "and Liberace is gay."
Because it's so brilliantly written, too, you forgive it and you kind of almost appreciate it even more now, knowing that he just like made it up out of whole cloth. But it just is this article that, along with this movie, pretty much created the template for how disco was going to be viewed by people. And as I say, like, I feel like he is sort of taking these literary lenses and looking at stuff, and he's like, okay, I don't really like this culture, but how can I elevate it? I'll elevate it by saying they're more badass and dicks and like anti-heroes, and like they're sort of more complicated than this preachy vision of a rock star or whatever. But I mean, it's, as you continue to read the article, I mean, it feels like he's trying to paint this whole scene as full of psychopaths, I would say.
Yeah, it's so weird. There really is that psychopath insinuation in the article. There's this part in the article, which also happens in the movie, when a girl kisses Vincent/Tony, and she says, "Oh my God, I just kissed Al Pacino." And Vincent thinks, and this is a quote from the article, "That was something incredible. It blew his mind. In fact, if anyone ever asked him and he tried to answer honestly, looking back, he would say that was the happiest, the very best moment of his life. Since then, whenever he gazed into the mirror, it was always Pacino who gazed back. A killer and a star, heroic in reflection." So this Vincent character, he really self-identified with Al Pacino and with that killer identity. And that's just such an interesting take about the youth culture being so influenced by new Hollywood films and the violence of new Hollywood films that they themselves want to emulate those violent characters that they see in the movies.
So the thing with this article and the influence of disco music and new Hollywood come together to create just this stew. Can we combine these different elements? Can we have transcendent feeling that people get from dancing to this music, often in choreographed groups where they're all doing the same motions together? But then you see these people's regular lives and it's truly bleak and horrible and almost unwatchable. We just sort of have these two aspects of these people's lives juxtaposed against each other.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, if you haven't seen the movie is seeing shitty lives, and then on Saturday night, they get to go disco dancing and they get to be the belle of the ball and the hero, and then Saturday night's over and they go back to their shitty lives and the struggle and the toil.
Every single character in this movie, except for Tony, is pretty depressed. All of the friends are pretty unhappy. The women are desperately unhappy. He views his life as bad, but he's like a seeker, and he's kind of trying to figure stuff out in a way that other people aren't.
Because Tony is the hero of the disco club, he holds on to that, and he looks forward to his Saturday nights every week, and I think that allows him to have the pep in his step, that iconic walk down the street in the beginning, his strut. Like, I think that comes from him being able to have something that he's proud of, which is his skill on the dance floor. Whereas the other characters don't have it to the same degree. They love going to the disco, just like he does, but they're not as good as him. So yeah, I think that he is happier than everybody else, but he's still dissatisfied with his life.
Yeah, and it's the whole thing is weird. Like, how this movie views disco, I think, is a little confusing, or it's a little bit difficult to parse. Like, I wouldn't be surprised, similar to how I read the article, as being written from somebody who is not exactly like a hardcore, like he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Like, he's just kind of making it up. And I think that from the beginning, there's a kind of ridiculousness to disco that a lot of people couldn't unsee. And I feel like the direction and the writing, the lens that is being put on this subculture feels a little making fun of it. It's hard to say.
I don't know if I agree. I don't know if it made disco seem silly to me. I was impressed by the dancing. I didn't realize that disco was a partner dance, or that it could be a partner dance. So I thought that the disco scenes didn't seem like they were mocking it. Maybe they were mocking a little bit Tony living for disco, for getting so much satisfaction out of that. Even though, as we've established, Nick Cohn did not really take in the disco culture. I say this as somebody who knows nothing about the history of disco, but just knowing that it was an underground thing within the gay and Black communities, it does kind of seem accurate that it would be the type of thing where you don't get to express yourself normally. There's aspects of your life that are totally shitty because you can't have normal acceptance in society, and that the disco dance floor is where you can truly just be yourself.
But it just seems weird the whole time. The eye that it has on the way that disco exists, it's just so programmed, and you have to dress a certain way. You have to move a certain way. He takes it very seriously, but I really think that the movie gets how beautifully ridiculous the 2001 Odyssey is. It's just at one point, like, there's a shot in the first disco scene of the DJ, and he says, "Oh yeah, man, I dig that polyester look." And I'm like, that feels like a joke. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like a little bit that nobody who's making this movie can quite take it as seriously as the culture maybe would want it to. It just may, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it just, because especially also, like, these characters are irredeemable. Their moments of escaping their lives are, you're constantly thinking about all of the bad shit that they've done. So it maybe that's casts a ridiculous pallor over everything for me. But this all feels a little bit like it's not quite mocking, but it's heightening something a little bit.
Well, I feel like the script is bad. And I feel like maybe a lot of this comes from a bad script. The script is by screenwriter Norman Wexler, who he got Oscar nominations for Joe in 1970 and Serpico in 1973. So, you know, he's made good stuff before, but I personally do not like the script. Nick Cohn originally wrote a draft, and then Norman Wexler took over. And I wish Nick Cohn had written the actual screenplay, because in the article, the character of Vincent and all the characters, they're just so much more interesting to me. I mean, no, I think Tony's really interesting in Saturday Night Fever, but the rest of the world.
I think Stephanie's, and she's wholly invented for the movie.
Yeah, we will talk about Stephanie, definitely for sure. I don't know. There's so many things about the script though that I don't like. To me, it feels like a West Side Story ripoff, and there's a lot of silly, over the top moments, like when Tony's in the club, being the king of the dance floor. There's like a girl asking to wipe the sweat off of his forehead because he's so good, or like a girl begging to kiss Tony, or guys listening to their friend fuck a girl in the car, like, look at you fucking that girl. Like, I don't know, it's just so over the top, and I don't know, I really didn't like the script. And Pauline Kael agrees with me. She said, Norman Wexler can't seem to keep his mind on anything for long. You never wait more than 4 scenes for any issue to be resolved, and then he hops off to something else. The picture is like flashcards. It keeps announcing its themes and then replacing them, which I totally agree with.
And so Wexler, he wrote, just to go, Joe and Serpico, and he did script doctor work on Lipstick and The Fan and this. And if you look at this collection of movies, these are all unrelentingly upsetting works that involve very rapey, shitty characters, in my opinion. And Wexler, by the way, I mean, I don't normally, I guess I'm only bringing up his personal problems right now because of the shittiness of the script in my mind. But yeah, he was known for erratic bipolar behavior. He was arrested in 1972 for claiming he was going to threaten Nixon or something. And yeah, I feel like his writing is a little edgelordy. This whole movie, it feels like it can't quite take anything seriously, or if it is taking it seriously, it's like this movie has in its mind what you need to make a movie. And that's new Hollywood, right? You can't even imagine the stuff they're letting us get away with right now. We got to go for it, right? This is what we're doing right now, guys. We're being like fucked up. So it's like, okay, what's a movie? Well, a movie's a bunch of shitty behavior, misogyny, violence, throwing some rapes, and yeah, we'll have a disco touch.
So much misogyny. Tony asks Annette, what are you anyway? Are you a nice girl or a cunt? And then, there's a scene where Tony, one of his friends, Bobby, the one who accidentally gets his girlfriend pregnant, and the whole movie is this underlying story of oh my God, what's Bobby gonna do? Bobby, he's watching Tony and his friends pull a prank on Annette, and she gets fooled by it, and she's like, oh my God, she thinks that they died or something, and then she realizes they were just messing with her, and Bobby mutters to himself while looking at Annette, and he says, you stupid bitch. And then, there's multiple rape scenes. And it's not clear that the characters are bad for doing all these things, in my opinion.
I don't agree. I really don't agree. I think that this movie is, I don't want to say it's moralizing or whatever, but I think this is a movie that is very certain of what it thinks. And it's just no, I am showing you the reality. In reality, all of these guys, all they ever say is the most racist, misogynistic, homophobic shit on their way to rape a girl. That is their whole raison d'etre. And I think that it's this no, man, I'm being real kind of thing.
But okay, so Tony almost rapes Stephanie.
Oh God. No. We gotta, I mean, I guess we'll talk about it now. But yeah, this movie ends with the main character attempting to rape the female lead. And then other rapes happen and other stuff happens. And that's the climax, but it's not the ending.
First of all, he does one of the best things he does in the whole movie, where there's a dance competition and he wins. Him and Stephanie win the dance competition, but he knows in his heart it actually should have been the Latino couple who should have won the competition. And the only reason he won was because he's an Italian American and it's an Italian American club. It doesn't sit well with him that he won, and he gives the trophy to the other couple. And he's like, you guys deserve it. And you're like, damn, that was so good of him.
Right. And again, that is right. The movie knows racism is bad, I would say. And then before he rapes her, he gives a monologue about the cycle of abuse, which is what this movie is all about. It's about people abusing each other, hurt people. He gives a monologue about the cycle of abuse on his way to a rape.
He almost rapes her, but still, he attempts to rape her. He's trying. And then later he's in a car while Annette gets gang raped by his friends, and he doesn't do anything about it. And so that's all fucked up and bad. But then the movie ends with him going to Stephanie, and Stephanie's like, I don't want to let a rapist in my house. What the hell? No. And then he charms his way through the door, and she forgives him, and they have a happy romantic ending. And I'm like, what? The movie forgives him so quickly.
Well, again, I don't know that it does. I just don't think that it really delves as deeply into the moral complexity, because this movie is ridden with conflicts, okay? when who was it that said that was that Pauline Kael says it introduces a new thing and then solves it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, but that's because this movie has approximately 15 billion interpersonal conflicts to drop you right in the muck in. I almost would want to go through every scene and just point out all of the different unpleasant aspects of what's going on. There's one scene where the friend who's gotten his girlfriend pregnant, you get to see him anguish over the fact that he's gotten his girlfriend pregnant. Also, call her like a bitch or something. He's sad about the fact that his life might be over, but he also hates her. You see him be a dick about that. So it's like two different kinds of discomfort. Then he has a discussion about abortion with Tony's ex-priest brother, who then you're seeing this disturb this guy on a sort of religious level. Then that kind of fucks up his relationship with his brother in a way. It's just like everything is weighed down by all of these small problems that people are constantly having, and they pile up. And yes, they sort of resolve very quickly, but another one's right around the corner all the time. That's why, I mean, this movie might be, it might be the pound for pound, the most difficult to watch film I've ever seen. In a way. And that, like, okay, this is a cliche about this movie at this point. For a long time, the cliche about Saturday Night Fever kind of was just, oh, it's disco dancing and look, he's strutting around and stuff. And now I would say for the last 15 years, the cliche has become, no, do you know what that movie's actually like? It's like really fucked up and disturbing. But even that doesn't quite get at what I'm talking about. Like, you still imagine like it's going to be darker than I think it's going to, but no, this is like the most upsetting new Hollywood movie I know of.
It's not that satisfying darkness. There's something that can be very satisfying in a dark new Hollywood ending. But the fact that this is bleak all the way through, and it's that kind of bleakness I hate of small lives.
Yeah, I want to say this is my version of that. Like, I was having the you feeling. This is my version of hating watching sad small lives.
Yeah, I mean, it is just so funny that this is my second time watching it. My first time watching it, I was so excited because I'm like, I love dancing. We'll talk about dancing a little bit later, but I love dancing. I was like, this will be fun. John Travolta's a super fun actor. It's disco. I can't wait. And I think my mom was like, it's not as fun as you think. And then I watched it, and yeah, it wasn't that fun at all. And I almost kind of forgot before our rewatch what it was like. And yeah, I don't want to watch this movie ever again, to be honest.
God, no. No, I can't. The idea of this movie being beloved by somebody, let alone it being a critic's favorite movie of all time, is truly a peek into an insane mind. And of course, this brings up the critic who did love this movie above all was Gene Siskel. Now, what do you know about Gene Siskel?
I know that Siskel and Ebert were a pair of critics. They had like a TV show thing. And Ebert was the more famous one, and Siskel was kind of just like his rival. Their whole thing was they would like fight with each other. And I know that they both have very lame opinions.
Well, Ebert won a Pulitzer, which he's got that over all of the other film critics. I don't think Kael has one. Did she?
He won a Pulitzer for film criticism?
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't even know you could do that, but okay.
Well, Ebert, Kael, I think you and I obviously could characterize her pretty well, what her opinions, what the cliche Kaelisms kind of are. And Ebert is similar. Like, Ebert has a vibe that I think is pretty distinct. I mean, he talks about movies as being emotion machines, and Ebert is certainly, I think, more like a modern critic, where he is trying to judge a movie for what it is. He's not sort of bringing some hoity-toity critics. Something being good can be plotted on a graph, and I can tell you if something's like... Ebert is a little bit more like, let something as they come. Siskel, I would say, a far worse writer than Ebert, but much more of a heady critic. I was actually looking at their number one movies from 1970 to 1997, and I'm kind of making fun of Gene Siskel for liking Saturday Night Fever right now, but I gotta say, the man had amazing taste. Like, sort of all of his number ones, where I was like, damn, like he picks two Romer movies in a row. 1969 and 1970 are both like his favorite movies of the year. And I'm like, damn, this guy fucking had taste. He gave Saturday Night Fever a 3.5 stars out of 4 review originally. And it just sort of grew in his mind as being this movie that stuck with him that he couldn't stop thinking about, which is so weird. He bought the suit, the iconic white suit that John Travolta wore at auction. And his take on Saturday Night Fever, I would say, is kind of the correct one, which is movies shouldn't be that hard to make. You should just be able to take a thing like disco dancing and then kind of put it together with some characters and situations, and that's all a movie should need to have. And I think that is kind of what this movie is it's just kind of just like dark bullshit, mix it up with some disco dancing that gives it that sort of character and flavor, and that's a movie. I really don't like this movie, but I do think it's pretty interesting to think about. Sort of repellent to think about, but I do think that it throws a mix of stuff together. We'll talk about dancing and what that means to us, but the dancing sequences will be 5 or 7 minutes long, and you're just staring at Travolta dance around and thinking about all of the stuff that's going on in his life. So it's kind of a ruminative film. It does give you these moments to breathe and stop and to sort of assess like what's going on in his life. I mean, this sort of not to jump ahead to the sequel, Staying Alive, but watching that movie the whole time for me, I'm just like, none of these characters know that he tried to rape Stephanie. You're just sort of like have this weird knowledge of this fucked up character's life, but it's just juxtaposed against what he really cares about, which is dancing. And in that moment, he's not thinking about it, but we as the outsider can't help but know that.
I mean, the sequel addresses it in a weird way. He's trying to pick up this chick, and he says to her, I didn't always respect womanhood. But then, like, in the sequel, she starts walking away, and he immediately grabs her arm to try and, continue and hit on her and stuff. And it's like grabbing her arm like that in an aggressive way. And it's just so funny that the sequel is trying to excuse it or address it by saying, like, yeah, I used to be a misogynist.
It's just such a weird idea for a sequel to. I don't know how you can possibly really come back from the ending of the movie is him reconciling with a girl he tries to rape. So you just kind of have to ignore it, I assume, if you're actually going to you can't really talk about that. That's just something that happened in his past or whatever.
You brought up the fact that there's this disconnect by people remembering the movie as a really fun movie, but then it actually being really bleak. And I wanted to suggest that maybe part of this disconnect comes from the fact that there were two versions of the movie. So there's the original rated R movie, which it was the highest grossing rated R film in the 70s. I remember having this weird experience while watching it where I'm like, does this movie need to be rated R? Because it does feel very West Side Story-ish in a way that it doesn't need the rated R aspect, but it has so much cursing. It says like fuckhead and pussy finger and like lots of racial slurs. And the Paramount executives hated how bleak it was and how many F-bombs there were. But so it really like leans into this, R-rated aspect, despite the fact that the R-ratedness doesn't seem to be necessary for the film. And they released that version, and then after it was a success, because it was a very big critical and commercial success, after its success, they released a PG version in theaters and got a wider release. And so the PG version, they took out the rape scene with Annette, they shortened the gang fight sequences, they removed a lot of the cursing, either through like cutting lines or alternate takes, or they did some like really bad like ADR voiceover. Apparently there's one notoriously bad version of this where in the original Annette yells, "You fuckers," but they replace it with her yelling, "You fakers," and it just looks really fake and terrible sounding. But I wonder if maybe some of this disconnect about its reputation is because people who watched the PG version didn't really get the full scope of the bleakness of it.
But even if you remove like the language and stuff, I mean, this movie is 90% people being sad and miscommunicating with each other. The first, Tony is the exception. He has a number of moments early on where you see him connecting with people, and he can sort of break through the morass of the shittiness of these people's lives that they're all living in that's making them be assholes reflexively to each other. Like there's this moment early on with Tony works at a paint store, and he is talking to this gruff, guy from the neighborhood. I can't remember what the joke is, but the guy said something like, "Oh, I should get this color, then I could paint my wife's ass with it." And Tony's like, "What color's her ass now?" And the guy's like, "What are you saying? You're talking to me about my wife?" And Tony's just like, "You brought it up." And the guy's like, "All right, you're okay, kid. It's not really painted a color. It's more like stripes, like stretch marks." So this is a cute moment of connection. Tony discussing this man's wife's ass and his displeasure about it with him. Like, even in moments where Tony is getting somebody to relax and be a little bit kinder, the peek into their personality that you're getting is never positive. There's this iconic early dinner scene with Tony and his family where everybody's being a dick. And like, it's like, this is what I'm saying. Tony cares a lot about his hair and his clothes. And he's made to eat spaghetti with his family, got his clothes and his hair covered up. Everybody around the dinner table is like slapping each other. And it's the cycle of abuse. And it's all quite explicit. In fact, you could say it's a little heavy handed, but I kind of like that scene. But Tony's obsession with his hair and his clothes, how sympathetic do you think the movie is? Like, do you think that it thinks that's him being aspirational, or that that's him being fussy and caring about stupid bullshit? What do you think?
Yeah, it is really hard to say. The movie's relationship to characters being aspirational is most interestingly portrayed through the character of Stephanie, because she's so condescending towards the people in Brooklyn. And she just wants to get out and move to Manhattan. She already works in Manhattan, and she looks down on everybody else for not knowing all the references she does, even though she's like, doesn't really understand them herself either. Talking about the cycle of abuse, you can tell that she was influenced by her married boyfriend or whatever. He's being condescending towards her and to Tony as well when he meets Tony. And you can see like that's where she gets all of that from. You dislike her, but at a certain point, something changes, and you kind of see her side more. Like Pauline Kael said about the actress Karen Lynn Gorney, who played Stephanie. She says, as the role is written, this girl is split into so many pieces, she doesn't come across as one person. You like her and you don't, and back and forth. You can't quite figure out whether it's the character or the actress you're not sure about until Gorney wins you over by her small, harried, tight face and her line readings, which are sometimes miraculously edgy and ardent. And I agree that you do get won over by Stephanie at the end. And you kind of admire the fact that at least she's trying for something, whereas Tony isn't really trying. And I think it's so interesting that the sequel, Staying Alive, Tony basically follows in Stephanie's footprints. Like, he moves to Manhattan and he actually tries to make it. He tries to be a Broadway dancer and follow his dreams, just like Stephanie was. And he's influenced by that and lets himself really give it a shot. The sequel, clearly it says, like, no, it's okay to want things and to go after them. And that feels very 80s. But I agree that it's very unclear in Saturday Night Fever whether it is admirable for a character to be aspirational.
That scene, the first scene where Travolta's trying to win her over, they're both just so warts and all. Like, it's so crazy how sexy and how much of a sex symbol Travolta became off of this movie. I mean, like, he does dance well, but almost in every scene in which he's, forced to talk to a woman, he comes off like a doofus, like he's chewing with his mouth open, and it's a kind of an amazing feat of sexual charisma that he is presenting himself as this fucking jamoke who, like, but he's got something special, right? But so in that scene, yeah, like, she is being very condescending towards him. And what's interesting, like, why you sympathize with him is you can tell that he understands that she's being condescending. And this is the thing about Tony. He is not a genius, but he is the most aware of human beings and psychology out of any character. And unusually so, like, even amongst most, like, he is, as I say in the intro, he's almost aware that he's portraying a stereotype or trying to fit into this new kind of cool person that is being emerged, that he's sort of helping to create. But yeah, like, he is very shrewd and incisive about Stephanie. He doesn't know exactly what she's wrong about, but he can just tell that she's a little bit full of shit, and that he can just smell that she's speaking about stuff that she's not really as knowledgeable about as she's pretending to be. So that kind of makes him sympathetic, and she is being a dick to him, even though he's also a misogynistic prick.
Yeah, totally. Like, he understands that she's putting on airs and that she doesn't quite understand everything that she's saying, but he doesn't look down on her for it. And in fact, she defends her when his friend says that she's just a stuck-up bitch. He has this, like, I guess
he's fair-minded.
He's like forgiveness towards other, or I don't know if forgiveness is the right way to say it.
Forgiveness towards me, the rapist.
He's just, yeah, I guess fair-minded. He maybe it's just that, like, he knows he himself is not a great person, and therefore he's okay with other people not being great.
But it's got these, like, heartbreaking moments. There's this scene where he upsets his mom, makes her cry, and feels so bad about it and is like, Mom, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and she won't. She can't say it to him. This is too much like people having actual fights. This movie is just too directly looking at stuff. Like, it's thinking too much about rape. And that almost sounds like I'm saying it should shy away from stuff like this, more of like, I can't handle this, but it's like too real.
I mean, you have this problem. Like, you don't like when things are too realistic in a movie because then if they're not interesting, if they're just...
That's not what I'm talking about. This movie is definitely interesting. This movie has the opposite problem of that. This is too much conflict. It's mistaking conflict for endless characters being at odds with each other about the most horrifying things that can happen to people. This movie's climax includes multiple rapes, suicide. These things all happen within 5 minutes of each other.
Gang fights.
Yeah, racism. I mean, they crash a car into a building. Their gang fight involves them crashing their car into the lair of another gang. Like, there's a lair in this movie.
I already said what I said about the script. I just think it is too much of like a shallow attempt at like a bunch of different types of conflict that are not pleasant to watch at all. But okay, we need to talk about the fact that, when we say like, okay, a lot of people thought this movie was fun or, it has this reputation, but it's actually really bleak. We have to take on board the fact that this movie introduced so many Bee Gees songs that then became incredibly popular. Like, some of the songs in this movie were already hits, but a lot of the songs were written for the movie. The producer, Robert Stigwood, he knew that one of the best ways to build up hype for the movie was to release the album ahead of the movie so that it would become a big hit. And then when people would watch the movie, all these new hits, then they're seeing happen. And that probably brought such an extra level of enjoyment to the moviegoers, the Bee Gees songs playing. And we haven't even addressed the fact that there's a lot of fun dancing, like there is fun dancing
in a really cool setting. Like, I will say, I mean, we'll talk about disco and what happened with the disco movement, but just looking at 2001 Odyssey, I don't understand why clubs don't still have this kind of crazy aesthetic. Like, why is every club so dark now? Why can't we have any clubs with light up floors anymore? Do places do this?
They didn't even do it at the time. I mean, that might not be true, but they built that floor for the movie. That they didn't actually have that floor in the club beforehand.
Well, they should. And you know what else they should have? A stripper in the adjacent bar.
I was thinking, like, this is a crazy club. They're just, like, disco dancing and then go in the back and there's a stripper right there. Like, what kind of club is this?
Yeah, it's like Travolta has his dance and then he's got to go get his whiskey and soda and tip Cheryl $5 to go see him shake her tits around. Like, he's like, I need to do my routine.
Okay, what is your feelings about disco music and the Bee Gees?
I really think we're going to have to take a step back. Okay, so in order to discuss disco, we need to understand that I and you came up in a truly post-disco environment. Like, in the 90s and the 80s, disco was really uncool in a genuine way. I would say that ABBA kind of had this perennial nature that sort of, and maybe, but also an extra resurgence in the 90s. But you really have to understand, like, nowadays, I think disco, it's incredibly influential in a lot of current music. And I think a lot of pop music now you could classify as kinds of disco. But for a long time, disco was really sort of slimed because of this whole, do you know about the whole disco sucks thing?
Yeah, I didn't know about it until researching for this movie. But it was this campaign that was started in 1979. There was this Detroit rock radio DJ, Steve Dahl, and he was annoyed that his favorite rock songs weren't being played on the radio anymore, and it was all just disco music. So he launched this Disco Sucks campaign where he encouraged all of his listeners to phone in their disco requests, which he would then destroy on air with explosive sound effects. So he would be like destroying the disco records. And they organized this big event held during a White Sox game where people showed up in 1979 with their disco records and they all smashed them. But there was this current under the whole Disco Sucks movement of racism and homophobia, where disco sucks also evoked like disco sucks dick, that kind of thing, like men sucking each other's dicks and stuff. So there was like this homophobia against it all because it was really a thing that was born in the Midwest, kind of hating that this disco culture was being shoved down their throats when they wanted good old boy rock and roll instead.
Yeah, it's more of an urban thing. But I do think, now that I'm just kind of thinking about this right now, I kind of wonder sometimes how much people who were hardcore disco sucks people were thinking about the semiotics of this. I do think there were probably a lot of people who were annoyed by the ubiquity of this extremely idiomatic and specific kind of music all of a sudden being everywhere. Like, I do think now we've sort of taken this thing to be purely this underlying anti-urban thing. But I actually do think that there probably were a lot of people who were like, I hate this music, in the same way that people are always like that about pop music. Because this is like replacing a more quote unquote authentic kind of popular music that arose. Like, this is so early in the history of popular music mattering in the culture. It's like 15 years after any of this started mattering to the culture at all. So all they had was like this 60s idea of the Beatles, the best, the coolest, most innovative band is the most popular band. And then, you know, the 70s kind of things start breaking off. And this is kind of the first real dominant pop movement.
As somebody who grew up in a small town, I can tell you that hearing about the disco sucks movement and the like, I just want my rock and roll, you know, like disco sucks, like that just really resonated with some of the things I witnessed in my small town of, you know, people hearing certain kinds of music and being like, that's just a bunch of gay shit, you know, and hating that it's like forced down their throats. So I don't doubt for a second that there was a lot of racism and homophobia underlying it for quite a lot of people.
I don't want to discount that. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm actually trying to, it's kind of funny because we're kind of introducing these different takes on this thing all at the same time. Like, I don't know, maybe people are listening to this who don't know about this. I fully agree that definitely it does underlie a lot of this stuff, this pro-white, pro-good old boys kind of thing. I'm just saying that I do think we have gotten a little far away from the fact that this was a style of music that kind of sounds the same and like I can imagine somebody getting sick of. Do you know what I mean?
I think anytime there is this huge trend that suddenly takes over everything, is
like trap beats would be the modern equivalent.
Like, it's going to quickly become cheesy. And that's exactly what happened. Like, the Bee Gees became super popular. Disco became super popular. But then the Bee Gees very quickly became super lame. They kind of were a flash in the pan and burnt out because of how quickly they skyrocketed to popularity after this movie. Disco was an underground movement before this movie, but this movie really made disco insanely popular.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I gotta be honest, in the movie, like, some of the songs are repeated multiple times, and we've kind of pushed this episode a long way down the road because we ended up shoving the Killer of Sheep episode into the slot that we were gonna record this episode for. So, I mean, I've been listening to a lot of this soundtrack to kind of keep my interest in disco, and I'm getting a little sick of it.
I think the songs are super fun. And if any of those songs came on in a playlist, if I'm at a wedding or something, like, I would dance my ass off to them.
Of course.
But first of all, I don't like any movie soundtracks where it's the same band or the same group singing the whole time. I think I complained about this in The Graduate because it sounds too similar. So the fact that all the songs are from the Bee Gees, or like almost all of them, it's very annoying and it does all sound the same. And then they repeat songs, as you mentioned. It's so annoying when they repeat the songs. So I also was very sick of the soundtrack by the end of the movie. Like, not even just during our research and stuff. It was like by the end of watching the movie, I was like, oh my God, stop with the Bee Gees songs already. But I do think they're great songs, like, on their own, without having to listen to them again and again, all one right after the other. This soundtrack, you know, it was a collaboration between film studio and a record label. Because Robert Stigwood, who was the producer of the film, he also was a music entrepreneur. He was a manager for Cream, and he was a manager for the Bee Gees, and he managed a record label. So this movie, he was merging both of his different business ventures. And the success of this movie and the success of the album, which was one of the best-selling soundtrack albums worldwide, and still remains to this day the second best-selling soundtrack of all time. Can you guess what the first best-selling soundtrack is? And specifically, it's best-selling soundtrack, so these are all films before 2010s, like before the streaming era.
Is it a musical?
Not in the way you're thinking. Like there's songs in it, but no, it's not a musical. It's not a musical.
I can't imagine what's better selling than this. I'm sure you're gonna blow my mind telling me what.
The Bodyguard?
Okay, yeah, I get that.
I guess that's not that exciting.
But that is weird because that was like one hit, really. But I guess it was just a mega hit. But this had multiple singles off of it.
Yeah, but like Whitney Houston, she's such a star. I don't know. But yeah, it's kind of crazy that one is the number one. But okay.
I guess that song lasted longer than these songs really did. Like that song is as fresh now as it ever was.
But so the success of this basically being like it's a movie soundtrack tie-in. It really set off a whole trend of movie soundtrack tie-ins. So, like, because of this, you then had movies like Urban Cowboy, Dirty Dancing, Flashdance, and Titanic, where the soundtracks play really integral roles in the movie itself. This is a very, very key film for the history of soundtracks in movies.
Yeah, now that you're mentioning this, I'm looking at this list of movies that you have, and yeah, do we do this anymore? There's not really a lot. Like, is Pitch Perfect the last big soundtrack movie, do you think? Like, what's another, I don't know, when was the last My Heart Will Go On? I don't think there's been one since then, really.
I would say Let It Go in Frozen.
No, that's a musical. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's different than like a tie-in to which you point out The Lion King, which that is a musical, but that's like God or Can You Feel the Love Tonight, which I think is basically just Elton John's attempt at a hit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's not as big anymore.
I think Pitch Perfect might be the last one.
Yeah. I mean, is just music not as exciting anymore?
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, like, Kendrick's got a new movie with Trey Parker and Matt Stone coming out. Maybe there could be some music in that. I don't know anything about it, but yeah. And so I think now this would be a good time to talk about so this is a hugely influential soundtrack, and it was incredibly influential on a band called Grateful Dead, specifically the drummer Mickey Hart. I've been bereft of any Grateful Dead references, or maybe I think I've missed some in previous episodes, some more recent episodes. I'm always wanting to throw in Grateful Dead content, and sometimes it's easier than others, and this is a very direct Grateful Dead tie-in. Interestingly enough, Grateful Dead, they had connections to both Saturday Night Live and Saturday Night Fever. And as I said, they had a song called Saturday Night. I think they were right at the forefront of Saturday Night research. But so, yeah, disco and, this, like, what disco is. I don't know if you could define disco, but they call it 4 on the floor, 8 on the hi-hat. Do you know what I'm saying by that?
No. Something about the beat? I don't know.
Yeah. Disco, 4 on the floor, which is just the kick drum. So boom, 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 boom. And then 8 on the hi-hat, so it's an extremely square beat. It's not syncopated at all. Disco makes everything very formal and like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And in fact, in one point in this movie, I mean, they talk about Latin music as being a sort of adjacent culture that, like, at one point, Travolta asks Stephanie, you want to do Latin hustle or Bronx hustle? Or what is it? There's a Latin hustle, apparently, that's different from the hustle. And yeah, like, as we say, like, there's a Latin gang and Latin rivals that they have. And at one point, there's like a Latin song that the DJ puts on, and Tony's like, I can't dance to that. I gotta get off the floor. I can't dance to that. And the music is cool as fuck. It's kind of syncopated. Yeah, so you get what I'm saying? Like, disco is very regimented and clean, which is what makes it so good for group dancing and, sort of simple movements that everybody can get on board with. This led to a period in Grateful Dead called Disco Dead, where they made a number of songs and they sort of changed some of their current way they played songs to be a lot more disco-fied. And they would sort of take country songs and have that like 4 on the floor and 8 on the hi-hat. Me and my uncle riding down. So this was a huge influence. Mickey Hart played the soundtrack constantly. They played it sometimes between shows. So I'm just excited to say that, like, this, I got to think about Grateful Dead in the context both of how this influenced their music, but also, of course, I sort of have an experience like the 2001 Odyssey one in my life. I sort of have this experience of going to a special club where, I don't know, we have a very small listenership currently, mostly our family members and friends, so maybe a lot of you actually have heard me talk about this, but for those of you who don't know about the sort of the culture of being a Deadhead and a Grateful Dead fan, there's all these tribute bands. The country is riddled with them. Every major metropolitan area in America has multiple Grateful Dead tribute bands that Deadheads will go and regularly see, usually like at weekly spots. Like I have multiple weekly spots I can go to go see this and dance my ass off. If you don't know about Grateful Dead, it's like improvisational music. So a tribute band like plays their songs, but they're improvising too. So it's not quite like a tribute band like you might be thinking of, where it's some perfect recreation of the stage act of Guns N' Roses or whatever. This is people playing a kind of music. Like it's like going to a jazz club, or my analogy for it is like it's like a Shakespeare theater. I happen to rip it up on the dance floor, if I gotta be honest. I kind of kill it, and I sort of go, and I'm like a weird little star sometimes. I have people complimenting me and coming up to me, and you're going into being a different version of yourself, but you're also sort of meshing with this mass of people. Like you're going to become sort of more anonymous while at the same time bringing your true self out. It's weird. And you, of course, are very into dancing, but you're more into partner dancing, which maybe you view as different. But anyway.
Yeah, I love dancing. I'm a big fan. It's not just partner dancing that I love. Like I love going to weddings and just killing it on the dance floor.
But not the club.
I used to like going to the club. Sure. Yeah, I loved that. Yeah. Yeah, you don't
This
fucking
is news to me.
We've never gone to the club together, but I do.
I would go to the club.
Let's go to the club.
Honey, can we go to the club?
But yeah, I love dancing. One of the things I love in particular about partner dancing, which is something I do a lot of, like I love fusion dancing and swing dancing and that kind of thing. So improvised partner dancing. One of the things I love about it is normally I don't like when people touch me. It's different if I'm in a relationship with somebody. Like, of course, then I like cuddling and touch and all that. But if I'm not in a romantic relationship with you, I don't want to be touched by you. I don't like hugs with friends. It weirds me out. I'll do it. I'll still hug you, but I'm just not really into touch that much from people that I'm not intimate with. And the one exception, though, is on the dance floor. So when I go partner dancing, I love being able to just soak up touching a stranger and connecting physically without having my ickiness surrounding it. And I don't like talking to the people I dance with. I don't want to like be friends with my dance partners on the dance floor. I want to dance, share a beautiful fucking moment, and then part ways and have that be a sacred, special joining of two souls on the dance floor.
Yeah, you see, and this is still an experience that is blocked off from me. I still can't get, I mean, I can partner dance. Obviously, I've done musical theater for a long time, but I have a hard time with the being okay touching somebody. This incredibly hot chick came up to me last week and was just like, "Can I dance with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah," but like, I kind of don't even know how to dance with another person, like not even touching or whatever. Just like, I don't know how to dance for fun and incorporate another person in it. It's kind of just got to be for me. And I wish that I was better at this. This is something I have a hard time connecting with people. I'm definitely not interested in talking to people that much, or I am, but I don't know how to do it. And I don't know.
Sam is such a joy to watch. Their style of dance. It is such an explosion of personal expression. And it's unlike any other type of dancing you've ever seen. And yeah, I just want to say it's like really, really lovely to watch.
Maybe I'll start a TikTok.
Yeah, you should. But I could see how, if somebody else wants to like dance with you, it'd be like cramping your style because it's such a personal expression. I feel like you had a very complicated relationship with dance when I first met you. When I tried to get you to come dancing with me, because you as an actor, like it's so wrapped up in your career, like being a good dancer was important because you needed to be able to do it for your career. I feel like that created a weird pressure. And wasn't like, I just thought it was a fun thing. And I think you resented a little bit that for you, it was your livelihood. And then also I felt like you felt there was a lot of judgment from all the dancers towards each other. But I feel like since I've observed you become part of the Grateful Dead community, that it really unlocked dancing for you. But maybe that's not the case?
No. It's definitely, you're describing an accurate journey that I had. I always had a weird chip on my shoulder about dancing because I took tap and jazz and ballet as a kid and stuff. I have learned how to dance and I am very comfortable with my body, but I have this thing which we'll segue well into talking about Travolta, which is I naturally will dance in the street Maybe I hear a melody in my head. Maybe I hear a snippet of a song I like at a bank and I'm online with this has always been the case. Or just like whatever. I feel very unself-conscious if I hear music or something that makes me want to move. I will move regardless of context. What I always had problems with is this like, yeah, it's like going out to the club. Like, it's like I have to like the music. Like, if I'm going out, I can't. And this is, we have friends and people who listen to a lot of house music and techno, and I can get into a lot of that, but sometimes it doesn't really make me feel like dancing. And that's kind of the thing is I think I'm trapped in this, like, I need it to move me in this way, but I am extremely open to being moved. But if it doesn't work that way, I can't just like turn on, okay, I'm dancing now just to these sounds, like, because the setting is a club setting. Does this make sense? Travolta talks about this.
Yeah. I feel like I could dance to anything if the situation calls for it. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
If I'm at a friend's wedding and they're like, look, I just really want people out on the dance floor. Like, I can be like, no matter what kind of music, I'll give it my best shot.
And I think I'm better at this now because of the Grateful Dead, dancing at any music.
So, okay, John Travolta is known as a dancer. He's famous for that. And can we break that down? Like, because he wasn't a professional dancer before this, So it's not like he was a dancer first and then became an actor. Like, I think he's known as a dancer because of Saturday Night Fever. And then because he did the twist in Pulp Fiction, which already was a big deal because, like, oh, he's going to dance again, So it's just so interesting that he's known as a dancer because of this movie. He was actually already a teen heartthrob because of his role he played in the TV show Welcome Back, Kotter. And I had never watched Welcome Back, Kotter, but I looked at some scenes on YouTube, and he does a lot of goofy dancing in that, too. And it's very fun. So I think he always has kind of had that dancing streak in him. But how good is he?
The answer is okay. But it is this thing of the hype feeding itself. He is the only actor that I know of other than somebody like Gene Kelly or Fred Astaire, or like somebody who's an actual dancer, and that's what the main thing that you're paying to see them do. He is the only actor I know who's that one of the most famous aspects of his star persona. I guess it's similar to like Jack Black is an unusually great singer for being a famous actor. I guess the guy from Napoleon Dynamite, that dance sequence, I guess, is pretty memorable, but he never really did anything else. All right, no, I guess the figure skating movie, I think, is probably similar to that, right? I've never seen it, God knows, but...
Yeah, but that movie sucks, so...
But I'm saying, like, right, how many stars incorporate being a good dancer as any part of their persona? It's not typically something that's called upon because, right, like, this, it's kind of, they're kind of pretending he's a good dancer, I would say.
What about the guy in Dirty Dancing?
Oh, Swayze. Yeah, that's true. He's, I would say, better than Travolta. Far better.
Was Patrick Swayze a classically trained dancer before he became an actor? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I kind of bet he is. I mean, he's very extremely athletic. He also does, surfing and shit in Point Break. But he also is in the Chippendales sketch with Chris Farley. I mean, Dirty Dancing is a movie that's sort of like a serious dance movie, would you say, in a way?
Yeah. Okay, Travolta as a dancer, I don't want to be like, this person's a good dancer, this person isn't. The thing about Travolta is he moves so well, and he seems to genuinely love dancing, and I love that he isn't afraid to be goofy about it. Like, he's not somebody who only wants to dance like perfectly each time and always look great. Like, he does goofy dancing sometimes, and he embraces that, and that's something I love about him so much. And so, regardless of how good is he actually on a technical level for dancing, he is so much fun to watch.
The weird thing about the movie is, killer opening sequence where he's just walking. And it's like, oh, this guy's got some rhythm. You can tell that he knows how to use his body. But then the first sequence where they go to the 2001 Odyssey, you're sort of learning a lot about the scene, and his dancing is a big part of it. How important he is to the scene is a big part of it. But there's kind of like a lot of plot elements that come into play. The first sequence is kind of not a real showcase for him, I would say. And in fact, but he has a much better showcase later. And maybe that also helps it, because it's like you're sort of starting off being like, this guy's not that great. And then he kind of blows you away and you're like, okay, yeah, now he's got me.
Yeah, definitely. I remember thinking, this dancing isn't that great, but then he does that solo. I forget what the song is.
It's Night Fever.
Well, he does that solo, and it's great. It's really great. Apparently there's a scene where he's doing the robot, but they cut that because they were like, no, robot's not going to cut it. Pauline Kael thinks Karen Lynn Gorney, who played Stephanie, was not a good enough dancer for this movie.
Well, she's certainly not a good enough dancer for him to become so, like, spiritually, mystically obsessed with her. He sees her, and, okay, I'm sorry, like, I'm not trying to say this, but, like, she is not, like, movie star great looking in a way. Like, she's kind of a normal looking person in an interesting way. Like, Fran Drescher is in this movie looking hot as fuck, and so is Annette. Annette looks hot, and Stephanie is, like, kind of a regular person and not an amazing dancer, but he sees something in her.
The actress who played Annette, her name is Donna Pascal. I actually know her best as the mom from Even Stevens.
I know.
Which as soon as I read that, I was like, oh, I knew she looked familiar. Yeah, they almost didn't hire her because the executives thought that she was too pretty for the role.
She is, I would say.
Yeah, you are kind of like, why doesn't Tony get with Annette?
Why doesn't she just find some decent guy? I don't know. Like...
Yeah. But in terms of Stephanie, you're right. Like, he becomes obsessed with her after watching her dance, and she really isn't good enough for that. But apparently she had an injury right before the movie, which made it hard for her to, really shine on the dance floor.
That's rough.
But watching her, though, as somebody who does partner dancing, to me, she seemed like a really good follow, in terms of, like, lead follow partner dancing. So she did seem to me like a dancer. It's just that she didn't look as flashy as Travolta.
The thing that he sees in her, I believe, is her dedication, because he starts off having Annette be his partner, and Annette just wants to hang out with him and, like, wants to maybe run through the dance once, and he's like, yeah, okay, that was pretty good, let's do it again. And she's like, do we have to? And he's like, immediately, okay, fuck you, like, I'm not gonna waste my time with this. And he can see that Stephanie is somebody who really cares about dance.
John Travolta, do you like him as an actor?
I struggle to think about movies of his that mean a lot to me outside of, like, Blowout and Pulp Fiction.
You don't like Grease?
Yeah, he's great. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know how much Grease means to me. It meant a lot more to me as a kid. But, like, I basically think John Travolta is, like, kind of this movie is weirdly perfect for his star persona, because it's like he's the kind of person who makes incredibly important movies that he kills, that are many of which are huge hits, that to me are, I don't know if it's not my taste, but it's like I genuinely think they're sort of like low shelf life movies. He makes very zeitgeisty works. Some of these movies like had a long life on TV, and like I watched a movie like Phenomenon a million times in my life. I've seen Face Off a million times in my life, but like none of these movies are really important to me. Like Blowout and Pulp Fiction are probably the two. That said, though, I think he's pretty great. Like I think he's a really good actor. I think he's incredible in this film.
I think he's an amazing actor. I would be comfortable saying he's one of my favorite actors. I haven't thought about him in that way before, but really contemplating him as an actor, I think that is true. He's just so fun to watch, so charismatic. He just makes me smile, and I just think he's really good. Like in this movie, his face when he watches Stephanie kiss her married boyfriend dude, that is a face I've seen on many guys in my life. Like that's just a very real face of suddenly feeling threatened, feeling upset, feeling angry, and trying to hold it all in and keep your face as stony as possible. When I saw that face, I'm like, that is a real fucking face. He's doing some serious acting right now. So yeah, I think he's absolutely phenomenal. And then on top of that, it seems like such a good guy, aside from like the Scientology thing. But I don't know, Pauline Kael says he isn't just a good actor, he's a generous-hearted actor, is the sense that she got from his performance, because he seemed really dedicated to getting the character of Tony right. And actress Donna Pascal, who played Annette, said in an interview that he really was very generous to the other actors, even though he was already a big star at the time from Welcome Back, Kotter. After each take, he would turn to the other actors and say, like, are you happy with that take? Even though he was the big star. He wanted to make sure other people got the chance to get the performance the way they wanted to get it. And I just respect the fuck out of that. I love a nice guy.
This is the youngest Best Actor nomination of anybody?
One of the youngest Best Actor nominations at the time. He was 24 when he got nominated for Best Actor for this movie, but the youngest was Jackie Cooper, who got nominated at age 9 for playing Skippy in a movie from 1931. And Mickey Rooney was also nominated twice at a younger age than John Travolta's nomination. And then now Timothée Chalamet had a younger nomination at age 22 for Call Me By Your Name. But he's one of the youngest nominations.
And this is a much better performance than any of those, in my opinion. Just think about the complexity of this role. He's got to play multiple levels of like this character who's very smart, but also very dumb at the same time, does a lot of terrible stuff, and yet you don't ever really get to the point of hating him. He's got to be handsome, he's got to be sexy, but he's also got to be a loser. And he's got to be the personification of this entire style of dancing. A role that makes me think of is like Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once, except that's the kind of role that you get at the end of your life. Just how much he's being asked. I think this is easily the most impressive performance by a person this young that I can think of that was Oscar nominated in a big hit movie like this. There was that short interview that we saw was it on the set of this, or I can't remember, but it was something about like talking about his relationship with the producer Robert Stigwood and the deal that they'd cut where he was supposed to do a 3-picture deal. And 2 of those movies are Grease and Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah. So Robert Stigwood, he originally auditioned John Travolta to be in Jesus Christ Superstar and didn't cast him in that, but saw his talent and signed him on a 3-picture deal, as you said, to do Saturday Night Fever, Grease. And Grease was actually supposed to come out first, but it got held up. And then the third one was Moment by Moment, which was not a success. But yeah, Travolta said it had to have been probably the most successful 3-picture deal ever made, just because of how insanely popular Saturday Night Fever and Grease were. I think it just really goes to show how good of a producer Robert Stigwood is in terms of how successful it was. Like Robert Stigwood, he is the guy behind, as we mentioned, Jesus Christ Superstar and Grease, Hair.
The cool musicals. The musicals that are for the younger generation.
And the Paramount executives didn't know that they had a hit with Saturday Night Fever.
I would not have guessed it would be a fucking hit, frankly.
Yeah, for sure. So Stigwood was actually able to negotiate almost 50% of the movie profits and total ownership of the soundtrack. So he made...
Holy shit.
Yeah, he made a killing off of this
total
movie.
ownership? I mean, I guess he was the Bee Gees manager, but...
Yeah, and, as I mentioned before, he insisted on the soundtrack coming out before the movie to build up the hype. And as we had said, it was like the second best selling soundtrack of all time and the best at the time. But yeah, he made so much money. He retired in the Bahamas in his late 40s. He just killed it in terms of the movie musicals, and he had a great head for business.
Yeah, but I would say, yeah, all of this stuff, Jesus Christ Superstar, Grease, Saturday Night Fever, Hair, these are very time-bound properties. I would imagine being Robert Stigwood and being like, I think I'm probably just about to become very uncool as far as my musical taste. I need to get out of being the tastemaker.
Yeah, it's funny that there's some people who become wildly successful and then they just chase more and more. But I guess if he retired in his 40s, he's like, nope, I'm good. I did it.
We've certainly spoken a lot about the producers and the star and the soundtrack, of course, and we have mentioned the name John Badham nary a single time so far in this podcast episode, and this is the name of the director of the film Saturday Night Fever. So do you want to talk about the direction and what you thought about it and who John Badham is? I mean, I recently reread or re-listened to his book on directing, which I have to say was a pretty useful book about directing, more or less on the same level as Sidney Lumet's Making Movies, perhaps not as well written, and of course not as about a guy who's made movies that were as good as Sidney Lumet, but useful stuff about how to deal with actors. Unfortunately, very little trivia about the making of Saturday Night Fever. But this movie was incredibly important and in John Badham's career. He replaced John Avildsen, who is the director of Rocky. Badham had done only a couple of TV movies so far. For some reason, he just got this gig, which again, they did not know was going to be a success. And because he made this movie as his first movie, it kind of allowed him to write a sort of check for himself where he got to make an eclectic set of films. And I would argue even like, sort of the characteristic eclecticism of his work is even visible in Saturday Night Fever because it is this weird mixture of elements and vibes. But I would say he's primarily views himself as an actor's director. A lot of what he seems focused on is making sure that the actors are comfortable and feeling collaborative and having a good time. And some of this extends to stuff like he's like, I don't like to make actors do like long takes. I like to get a lot of coverage. And just I want to make things as easy on them as possible. And I'm like, well, maybe you could push them a little harder sometimes, but
I don't have that much to say about John Badham, to be honest. Like, the only movie of his that I have seen other than Saturday Night Fever is, I think, War Games, which is a movie that I like. I think it's a great movie. The rest of his movies I haven't seen, and I do not like the direction in Saturday Night Fever. It has a bunch of weird angles that are like shot upward from the ground, and I just think they look strange. I don't think the movie looks very good. I just don't think it's that great of direction in this movie.
I feel the opposite about the weird angle shots. I think those are great. The most iconic sequence in this movie happens right at the beginning.
Yeah, when he's walking down the street and strutting to Staying Alive.
Yeah, but this is not just a guy walking down the street, okay? It's heavy cutting, as I say, a lot of coverage, but it really is doing that thing of trying to give you every little piece of the world, show you every piece of the art direction, as I think Tarantino talks about Scorsese doing. You got to show every little part of a thing. It's not just a guy. And I feel like in this, the low angle shots of him striding as if he's a giant man really help to enrich the picture that you're getting of his emotional state. The shot of him comparing his shoe to the other shoes. You don't get bored of just showing this guy walking down the street. He's building this whole sequence. So I actually do think that, I think some of it is sort of a young director making bold choices that, you could say are kind of too much trying something. But I think a lot of the time in the moments where he's got to build a mood and atmosphere, which are like the dance sequences, I think he does give you that. It's the dialogue scenes a lot of times that kind of, like, you're right. A lot of it doesn't look good in a way. And
I mean, you're right, though, that you have to give it up for the iconic opening shot. So I guess kudos for at least having that. Can we talk a bit more about the sequel, Staying Alive? Because it was a commercial success, actually, but a critical bomb. Like, it has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I don't think I've ever encountered a 0% before on Rotten Tomatoes. And I have to say, I think that's way too harsh for this film. Like, I'm not saying this is a good movie or anything, but I had way more fun watching Staying Alive than I did watching Saturday Night Fever.
Absolutely. It's actually a criminally underrated movie, I guess. It's not that good, but 0% is absurd. And I do think points to, like, the first movie is a new Hollywood movie and the second movie is an 80s movie made by Sylvester Stallone, who is a sort of a new Hollywood figure. But Rocky obviously represents a sort of sunnier vision of America, and Stallone is more identified with 80s culture. But how much more lauded and, like, seriously Saturday Night Fever was taken than Staying Alive, I think is really representative of how hoity-toity critics were back then. Like, I think that they really did equate darkness with depth. This movie is a much better advertisement for the beauty of dance, I would say. It's cheesier, but having just watched Saturday Night Fever, the contrast was so obvious, just how much more enjoyable it was to watch. Like, I wonder if people had already kind of forgotten what Saturday Night Fever was really like by the time Staying Alive came out. And this is just kind of a fascinating idea for a sequel, though, too, because it's like, it's not really connected to the first movie. Like, he walks by 2001 Odyssey at one point, and that's like the closest thing, and he like sees his mom. But besides that, it's just sort of later on in this character's life, it's a fascinating way to do a sequel. More things should be open to doing this. It's like an Updike sequel. It's just like what happened to them 10 years later.
Yeah, like, there's no disco dancing. He is doing Broadway, more modern dancing. Like, it reminds me of the type of dancing in Cats, the musical. And it has, like, the chorus line opening scene, which was super fun. It was just way, way more fun to watch. Way more pleasant. The ending was a little too drawn out and silly. It's not like it was a great movie or anything. If you feel like just putting on some silly 80s movie, I'd say go ahead, put it on.
It gets a little bit more finely grained with examining Travolta's dancing level, because he starts off as sort of bit part chorus dancer in this weird show that doesn't it's hard to imagine the show running very long. Yeah, and it's sort of implied that he kind of gets the job because of a connection that he has to the lead dancer. Then he, in an extremely awkward and unrealistic part of the movie, he replaces the lead guy because the lead guy is too polished and he doesn't have the intensity that Travolta can bring to this part. But it really does show you, it's like he's not really quite good enough. He's making up for it through his charisma, which is off the charts. He's a movie star and nobody else in the movie is. He's like trying hard. Like it's fun to see Tony out of his element where he's not just the king. And it's like, you're not really that good, man, you know?
Yeah, the sequel really does truly feel like they've thought through what would happen to this character if he actually tried at the end and tried to make it as a dancer. Like, what really would happen?
Yeah, to be fair, though, I do not think that what happens to him where he replaces the lead dancer essentially by negging him and like making the director give him I don't think that would really happen. But
and then what Tony does at the very end in their big dance number at the end, he totally goes off book, does stuff that was not choreographed just to make it flashier, is lauded for it. And there's no, like, he would get fired right away if he had done that in real life. So yeah, wasn't the most realistic in the world, but it's still fun. Certainly not a 0% Rotten Tomato score. Okay, do you want to talk about Saturday Night Fever as a new Hollywood film?
Quite the new Hollywood film. Not many movies that you think of in the era feature disco dancing as prominently, or dancing of any kind, really, as prominently as this one does. But other than that, I would say it's remarkably similar to something like a softer, rapier version of Mean Streets. It's just kind of like guys from the neighborhood who are Italian-American living in Brooklyn and the real lives of real Americans. It's literally ripped from the headlines, or it's ripped, it's this article. It's trying to talk about now, right now, and what's going on with the youth. And all of the figures are pretty much new Hollywood figures. Norman Wexler. It's interesting because this is the beginning of so many people's careers, Travolta and Badham, and it's the beginning of the Bee Gees' super ascendancy, but they've been around for a while. So I don't know. I don't want to just be like, it kind of, mostly fits into New Hollywood except for the disco aspects. But like, do you think of disco as being New Hollywood? I mean, it's only in the 70s, really. So I guess it kind of is New Hollywood.
I'm actually going to disagree with you about how much this movie is a New Hollywood film. Like, I think it has elements of New Hollywood. It's shot on location in Brooklyn and in the 2001 Odyssey Club, which obviously the name of that club is itself a New Hollywood reference, like 2001 A Space Odyssey. It has a lot of dark elements to it, although I don't think the dark elements are as genuine as some of the dark elements in other New Hollywood-y films.
It really does feel like it's somebody who's watched a new Hollywood movie who's like, I know what these are like. No, you misread what it was really doing.
It is obviously gesturing towards the influence of New Hollywood through, as we mentioned before, the movie posters of Stallone and Al Pacino on Tony's walls, and the fact that, as in the article, the original article and in the movie, like after a girl kisses Tony, she's like, I just kissed Al Pacino, Definitely working off of the New Hollywood influence, but to me, it has a lot more elements of kind of the 80s work culture and hustle culture than the 70s mentality. Now, of course, if you compare it to Staying Alive, which is like a super 80s film, obviously it's not that level of 80s. I feel like I said a similar thing about Alien, where Alien reminded me of kind of an 80s film, but then watching the Alien sequel, I'm like, oh no, this is really 80s. About the original article, in terms of the New Hollywoodness, it's about the youth, but this youth, in my opinion, is not actually squarely a New Hollywood youth. It's like a post-New Hollywood youth. And the article says, the cults of recent years seem to have passed them by entirely. They know nothing of flower power or meditation, pansexuality or mind expansion. No waterbeds or Moroccan cushions, no hand-thrown pottery for them. No hep jargon either, and no Pepsi revolutions. In many cases, they genuinely can't remember who Bob Dylan was, let alone Ken Kesey or Timothy Leary. Haight-Ashbury, Woodstock, Altamont, all of them draw blank. Instead, this generation's real roots lie further back, in the 50s, the golden age of Saturday nights. And he says that this youth culture that he's describing in his article that they're less radical than the generation before because the economy is worse. And so they take less risks and they just work normal jobs to be able to get ahead. And I do feel that in the movie. And Pauline Kael herself says that, the boys in this movie are part of the post-Watergate working class generation with no heroes except in the TV showbiz land.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess there probably are, like right now, we're probably in a position where there is more. I guess there's a lot of people who are obsessed with celebrities, but there's a lot of like anti-celebrity obsession, and a lot of people are obsessed with political figures now. So we're kind of in the opposite of the 70s, I think. Sometimes, I think a lot of young people sort of like lionize political figures in a way that I just think it would be very silly if you were like living in a post-Watergate world. And now like to care so much about culture is looked at as sort of dumb. I don't know. This is just kind of a random insight that I'm having.
But I think this focus on culture rather than politics, it's specifically the late 70s. Leading into early 80s. So yeah, I guess it's just that whole concept that New Hollywood isn't one single thing. It was made up of a series of different time periods within the 70s. We had the early, more radical countercultural films in the early 70s, and then they kind of transitioned to the more blockbustery films.
It's like a movie that the crass soundtrack tie-in parts work the best, not the story or the characters, even though they paid quite a lot of attention to trying and make that stuff matter. But I think obviously what will last about it is the soundtrack and the iconography. And that's it. It's hard to know if that was always the point, that was always what they thought this movie was really about, and that everything else was just kind of window dressing. And it's kind of like, well, you got to have that shit in order to make it a movie.
I think it just goes back to thinking about the article, because the article is so interesting, well written. But when you read the article, there's no music accompanying that. So you don't actually have the disco music. But now in movie form, you have all of kind of that dark edginess of the original article rewritten in kind of a lame way, in my opinion. But then you have the focus on the disco music, and pushed together, those things don't quite align that well. And then you've got this weird movie with different elements in it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the movie does not have the feeling of a new Hollywood movie in the sense of, like, it does not feel good.
All right, so I guess we might as well just wrap up with the Cold Stone rating. I think it's probably not going to be that interesting hearing what our rating is, because clearly we both didn't love this film. But Sam, you want to introduce what the Cold Stone rating is?
Yeah. Cold Stone Creamery is an ice cream shop where they size their ice creams based on a question of whether you like the ice cream, you love the ice cream, or whether you gotta have the ice cream. And this is an ascending scale, beginning at like and terminating with gotta have, right? These are the 3 steps of thinking about the size of ice cream that you want to put inside your body. So you could sort of say that we're thinking about what amount of this movie do you want to put inside yourself? So you could say you like this movie, you love this movie, or you got to have this movie. Or we could say it doesn't make the scale. And I guess by this, we're saying there's not really anything in this movie that you would want to put inside yourself outside of maybe a small sample or perhaps a couple of cuts off of the soundtrack. So, Elena, do you like, love, or gotta have the movie Saturday Night Fever? And we also will do Stayin' Alive, by the way, but Saturday Night Fever.
It doesn't make my scale. For me, this is like if I went into an ice cream shop and I thought I was buying chocolate ice cream, but it was like a bait and switch, and I accidentally bought licorice ice cream, which licorice is gross. And I don't even know if they make licorice ice cream. But yeah, it's like I accidentally took a bite out of ice cream and realized it was licorice and had to throw it away. That's how I feel about this movie.
I mean, I should have guessed this, but I was hoping I would get to be the only one who wouldn't let it make the scale, because it doesn't make the scale at all. Yeah, like this is like the most unpleasant movie I can think of. I think I Saw the Devil is a movie that I find about as difficult to watch as this. I'm struggling to think of anything else. I mean, it is that weird, licorice taste that you're saying. It's just imagine like a really unpleasant black comedy that's not pulling off its horrid twists and it's trying to be funny. Like there's something that this movie's trying to do that you can feel it failing at, and because it's taking such gross swings, particularly with how the female characters are treated, that there's an unwieldiness, and the movie does not feel sure of itself, except for the fact that it feels sure that it wants to be gross and have disco dancing in it. And yeah, like a wonderful lead performance. It's iconic. There's stuff to think about. We didn't. There's more stuff we could have gotten into. Like we didn't even really talk about his priest brother. There's a lot of intricate relationships that we could get into that are sort of interesting to think about. But I don't want to think about them. I would rather not think about them. Frankly, I like this movie. I like watching this movie less than Dr. Dolittle.
Yeah, Dr. Dolittle had like all the absurdism and stuff, and it had that like push me, pull me, and the crazy snail, and there were things that were kind of fun about Dr. Dolittle, even though it was a shitty movie. And this one just wasn't fun. I mean, well, okay, there's the dancing, and there's Travolta, so there are some fun things about it, but it wasn't enough to bring it over that like it line for me. What do you think about Staying Alive? Does it make your scale?
I kind of want it to be a like it out of spite, but I don't know if that would quite be true. But I actually kind of do make me think I am more into this movie because I like stuff about Broadway dancing. It's certainly a way better movie than the Chorus Line film adaptation. I think I might like it. But this is also just kind of as a point of comparison. But I don't know. Am I lying to myself? What do you think?
I'm the exact same. I'm like on the edge between doesn't make my scale and like it. But it was a pleasant experience. And again, maybe it was because we had just literally watched Saturday Night Fever, but I think it just barely makes it as a like it for me.
I liked it so much more than Saturday Night Fever. It truly does feel quite a vast difference between how I feel about that. And yeah, so I think by default it's a like it. Yeah.
So suck it, Gene Siskel.
Yeah, seriously, like what the fuck is going on with him? But could we for a second actually go back through his list of number one movies just to sort of give a shout out to what good taste he did have outside of this movie, which was not his favorite movie of 1977. Sure, okay, so yeah, just as a tribute to Gene Siskel, whose favorite film was Saturday Night Fever. 1969, his top movie was Z, a very cool choice. Not a movie I really like. How about you?
I've never seen it. I think we started watching it one night, but it was like too late at night, and I was like, I can't do this heady political movie right now.
70-71, My Night at Maud's, and then Claire's Knee. As I say, two Romeres in a row, and the two best Romero movie. Maybe not the two best, but two of the top ones. So it's kind of perfect picks, I would say.
Hell yeah.
72, The Godfather, kind of hard to argue with. 73, The Emigrants, a very interesting pick. 74, Day for Night, so he likes Truffaut. 75, Nashville. 76, All the President's Men. 77, Annie Hall, Booyah. 78, Straight Time. I don't know what that fucking movie is. 79, Hair. 80, Raging Bull. 81, Ragtime. All right, we're getting a little bit weird. I don't know what 82, Moonlighting is. 83, Right Stuff. Once Upon a Time in America. He picked Showa as his number one for 85, so suck it, Pauline Kael. 86, Hannah and Her Sisters, Woody Allen fan. 87, The Last Emperor, also won Best Picture. 88, Last Temptation of Christ, two lasts in a row. 89, Do the Right Thing, fuck yeah. 1990, Goodfellas, I mean, okay. 91, Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's apocalypse.
That's so funny.
That's a fucking sick.
He didn't pick Apocalypse Now as his favorite of that year in the 70s.
He preferred Hearts of Darkness. 92, One False Move. 93, Schindler's List. 94, Hoop Dreams, a famous Siskel and Ebert movie that they made a hit. 95, Crumb. That's amazing.
That's a movie you love.
And is an extremely cool and weird pick. 96, Fargo. 97, The Ice Storm. And 98, famously, Babe, Pig in the City.
That's really cute. Yeah, that is pretty good taste. But I just don't agree with the Saturday Night Fever, though.
Yeah, something happened to him there. I don't know. He bought the suit.
That concludes another exciting New Hollywood adventure. Thank you all so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Kale Your Idols on the podcatcher of your choice. Please take the time to leave a rating or review. It is extremely helpful for small podcasts like ours. We'd love to hear from you, so please reach out to us on Instagram or send us an email to kaleyouridols@gmail.com. We want to say thank you to the Illuminator for our logo, and thank you to ourselves for everything else. Please join us next episode where we will be laughing it up at the comedic stylings of Leslie Nielsen and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the 1980 comedy classic Airplane, a movie which directly references Saturday Night Fever.
Hey, Peter Fonda, how did we do?
We blew it. Marlon Brando. something good.